Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords. This is my cat here. The reason you're not seeing an RPG book is because today we're not talking about RPGs. But we're not talking about politics either. So, not exactly. We're talking about society, we're talking about religion and stuff like that. But anyways, if all you want to hear about is RPGs, this video is not really about that, so feel free to turn it off. But I've been trying to figure out something to say regarding this whole event that happened with the Covington Catholic schoolboys and Nathan Phillips. And I felt that almost everything that needed to be talked about has already been talked about in these last few days. And the reason I haven't said anything earlier is because I was busy kind of looking into a few things. And I do think that there's something that's kind of being overlooked here, which is regarding Nathan Phillips, right? I mean, the first time I saw that video, I immediately suspected something was up when there was no audio in the video, right? And then in the later video, I saw when there was audio, I heard what was being performed, what Nathan Phillips was playing there, and I'll get back to that. And I knew right away that this whole thing about him being the peacemaker was just a crock, right? But I guess the first thing I want to say is that the phenomenon of Nathan Phillips, what he did, and why he thought he could get away with it, in spite of making up all these stories, right? Including now we know that he wasn't actually a Vietnam veteran, and don't say, oh, he just always said Vietnam Times veteran, because that's not true. There's a story in 2008, an article where he explicitly talks about having been a Vietnam veteran and how when he came back, where did he come back from? Vietnam. He was spat upon by hippies and all this sort of thing. Like the most stereotypical thing you can imagine, right? But I'm not here. I'm not a military guy. I'm not here to talk about stolen valor. Other people have covered that, right? But the reason he's been able to get away with all of that is not the fault of American Indians, right? Let's start with that, right? And so I guess I kind of wanted to emphasize that we shouldn't really blame Native Americans for the phenomenon that is Nathan Phillips. They're not the ones at fault. And this is going to sound a little bit unpopular, but when I say it, but white people are. White people are responsible for Nathan Phillips, right? And more specifically, of course, it's baby boomers and hippie leftists that are responsible for Nathan Phillips. So let me give you a bit of background here. First of all, I'm a guy who's been a scholar of religions. I studied religious history and comparative religions, and I've been involved in religious movements, and I've been involved in the study of religious movements in my my day job, I guess you could say, for decades now. And I've had the opportunity along this, in the process of studying the origins of religion and things like that, to interact with a lot of Native Americans. In Canada, they call themselves First Nations, and from a few different tribes. I've learned a lot about some of them. I've learned a bit about others. It's all very interesting. Now, the first thing that most people, Westerners, I guess you could say, don't understand is that there is no such thing as Native American spirituality, right? I mean, I guess in a very, very, very broad sense, you could say there is. But what most people imagine is this kind of one generic religious belief system that all Native Americans have, when in fact, divided by nations and tribes, they have immensely diverse, immensely varied religious belief systems, right? So this is not, the idea of there being there's the Great Spirit, and then they all do this, they all do that, they all do the rain dance, they all have the sacred pipes, all of that sort of thing, right? That's a complete misnomer, and it's a product. Specifically, it's a product of certain efforts to create religious syncretization that happened in the early 20th century first with kind of the Theosophists and people like that, and then got adopted entirely by the New Age movement, okay? And where I'm getting to in all of this, and where we get to Nathan Phillips eventually, is that I don't know too much about the politics. I'm trying to be very clear about the stuff I do know a lot about and don't know a lot about here. I do not know a lot about kind of the element of how this applies to the politics of Native American peoples and what they feel about it, though I've been learning a bit about that these last few days. But what I am very familiar is about how it applies to spirituality of Native American peoples, at least in the tribes that I have had interaction with, the people from the tribes that I've had interaction with. If there's one thing that every Native person I've talked to really despises, is something that they themselves call plastic shamans, okay? So a plastic shaman is a person. It can be a white person, but usually when one of the things that they're really complaining about is that when it's a Native American person that basically fakes being a shaman, being a medicine man, makes up pretend stuff, claims things that they don't have a right to claim, and then use this to make money off of incredulous white people, right? And they sell themselves basically as pretend medicine men, plastic shamans, to the New Age movement. And it's something that really, really, really bothers, like the cultural appropriation in that context. Yeah, I know that that's a word that most of my viewers probably don't like. I don't like it either usually, but this is a very legitimate use of that word, right? The New Age movement has picked from hither and thither all kinds of little bits and bobs of all kinds of native spirituality from all different tribes, from all different traditions. There's a bunch of stuff they've just made up. There's stuff that they've taken from theosophists. There's just absolute nonsense, and they've cobbled it all together and called that native spirituality. And there's a bunch of people, a lot of white people and a lot of Native Americans, who are making money off of people selling, weekend workshops and dream catchers and blessed whatevers, crystal healing and all this stuff with the facade that they're supposedly, either they themselves are traditional native shamans or have been taught by them, right? And this really, really pisses off Native Americans, and rightly so, I would say. I'd say they're completely justified in feeling pissed off about that, right? And so it's something that is really bothersome to them, really troublesome to them when this happens, okay? Now, getting to the question of Nathan Phillips, his Vietnam era service aside, I've been trying to kind of find out a bit, talking to people that are, he's Omaha, and talking to people that are from the Omaha tribe and whatnot. And apparently from the people I've talked to, they're not, most of them would like to say, really, that he does not represent them, right? They don't really like him all that much. And in fact, you go back as far as, 2000 or so, which was when Nathan Phillips started showing up on the left-wing activism scene, and you have people from his tribe saying basically, well, he was a guy, his story, and this is his own, he admits his own story in this context, so I'm not revealing anything here that is inappropriate to reveal, and there's no debate about this, right? He was taken at the age of 5, put in a foster home, so he wasn't really raised within the context of his tribe. A very tragic thing, there was some serious problems related to that. No one is denying the hardships of that element, and I imagine that must have deeply affected him, right? He was a teenage delinquent, and then he went into the army, and he served in the army for 4 years, where he didn't go to Vietnam and mostly repaired refrigerators, right? That's the part that he never admitted, but now some of the people that specialize in stolen valor have proven it with his discharge papers. That's what he did, okay? And then after that, he kind of falls off the radar for a while. Then he surfaces again in the 90s, and then in the late 90s and early 2000s, where he starts to take up this kind of radical Native American activism and general left-wing activism. Okay, and even in the early period of that, there are articles, some of them are still archived on the net, where you see people from the Omaha tribe, they're saying, this guy does not represent us. he's just this lost guy. He doesn't really have a connection to us. We feel very bad for him, but he's if he's trying to represent himself as having our approval, he doesn't, right? And that's pretty much what I've heard now after this incident with Covington, with these kids, where he went towards these kids, he approached them, and he started playing this drum, which I'm about to tell you more about. So he's not. I don't think that he's very well regarded, because in part I know that the Omaha tribe, from what I've understood, because this is new studies for me, but it seems that they're a pretty orderly group of people. They're trying to they're kind of very conservative in some senses, not politically conservative. I mean in terms of their own culture, and I think that they find a lot of this sort of stuff unseemly. Right now, Nathan Phillips has been just the opposite of that. He has taken elements of Native culture, Native spirituality, and applied them into very radical activism. Right, and this includes stuff like his, walking up to a group of young teenagers banging on a drum, right? And he wasn't just banging anything, right? If you read the interviews that he gave after, he said, that he saw that there was tension, and so he went playing his drum to diffuse the situation. Well, if that's true, he picked a really weird song to play on his drum, because as far as I can tell, what he was playing there was the AIM song, the AIM, which he has been connected with, right? The AIM is the American Indian Movement, and it's a very radical movement. It's a separate Indian separatist movement, you could call it. They're politically radical. They're violent. They killed FBI officers, I think. They've killed each other. They murdered a woman on suspicion of having been an FBI informant and dumped her in a highway, left her corpse there. So this is a very radical group. And this song was a song that, it's not, when he was drumming there in that video, drumming in front of this kid from Covington High School, right, was not a peace song. It was the song of the AIM movement. It's basically a call to arms, right? It's a war chant. And he was drumming that. So that's a very odd choice, right? Of trying to create peace and and love, right? It doesn't sound like that was his real goal there, right? That is an aggressive song that he was playing, a song of protest, an anti-white song, you could say, or an anti-Western song. And so that seems a bit funny that he would say that this was, him trying to diffuse the situation. Another thing that I've seen is that he is frequently referred to as the keeper of a sacred pipe. Now, apparently, according to several articles, I can't absolutely confirm this is true, but it looks like it is. For the last 15 years or so, he's been going and doing these sacred pipe ceremonies for Native American veterans in Arlington Cemetery. Now, I have no idea whether he legitimately has an actual sacred pipe or not. He's also been referred to as an elder, and from what I spoke to with people in the Omaha, it's not always like this, because remember, every tribe is different. This is not something you can just universally apply, right? And so, for example, for the Cree, the term elder is a very specific sort of concept, and it represents a certain amount of respectability, right? Apparently, as the Omaha interpreted, elder is just a term applied to all of their old people, right? So, but you see, Western media keeps using this term, that he's a native elder. He's a native elder, as if that was something more important than just saying he's an old man, right? And he's not really that old. He's 64. He's not old enough to have served in Vietnam, right? He's not even a senior citizen yet. You can't even just say, I would say, well, instead of elder, why not just call him senior citizen, instead of trying to imply that there's something mystical about being an elder. But he's not technically a senior citizen yet, apparently. So, that's kind of funny. And yet, when you hear the word elder, if you're a Westerner, that sounds as though it's something super special, right? It sounds as though he carries with him some kind of mystical knowledge or wisdom, profound respectability, that it implies that he's deeply respected by his own tribe, right? And I don't think any of that is true in Nathan Phillips' case. Now, as far as the keeper of a sacred pipe is concerned, well, most a lot of the native tribes in North America were great admirers of tobacco and the pipes, right? Of course, theirs didn't look like this. That they used for sacred purposes, right? And it's a very fundamental part of the shamanistic practices of every tribe where tobacco could be attained, right? Because you couldn't get it everywhere. But it was very, very important. It was so important, and the pipe took on such an important role in some of these tribes that it was the sort of thing that could be used as a free, as like a sign of free passage from one territory to another, right? Now, different tribes put different amounts of weight on it, right? But in certain areas, some tribes put a lot of weight on it. And the Omaha are supposedly one of these, right? They put great emphasis on the on their pipes and the pipe ceremony of the Omaha, because some of them, in some cases, the smoking of the pipe type of ceremonies are very simple in some tribes, and others are very complex. And the Omaha tribe, apparently, it's a very complex ceremony. The pipe is considered very important, and they do, elaborate dances and things like that, and it has a great significance, right? So when I keep hearing that he's the keeper of a pipe, I haven't been able to find anything to the contrary of that. I'd be very curious if someone could tell me, right? But, the thing is that there are sacred pipes and then there are sacred pipes, right? There's a pipe that, you might have had a couple of buddies make for you, right? And then there's the pipe that you have been inheriting, that has been passed down to you from the previous keeper and the one before that for generations, right? And those have two very different spiritual significances to them. But in either case, I kind of wonder about this use, carrying around and using of this sacred pipe in the context of the importance that the Native American people in general, but especially specifically his own tribe, put on it, right? Whether they would be very happy about that, right? That he's invoking the concept of that pipe to grant himself authority and legitimacy, and to involve himself after that in partisan politics. I've seen comments from people, and I've also spoken directly through social media with people who are Native Americans from the Omaha tribe or from nearby related tribes, all of whom have said to me, that's not cool, right? We do not like that, right? So we can't blame Native Americans for Nathan Phillips or for what he's doing, right? Neither in terms of his origins nor in terms of what he's doing, what's going on now. But what we can blame, and the reason all of this has been allowed to happen, is because Western people now have this perception of this kind of dualistic form of how we look at Native Americans, which is really terrible, right? Because I know also from any Native American I've spoken to personally, or any First Nations really, because I've mostly interacted with Canadian First Nations people, it's another thing they really don't like, right? Is that to a lot of people who, to a lot of white people, right? You have either this mentality of natives being victims, or of them being, some like lazy drunks or something like that, or it's either one of those two, or they are, all-knowing shamans, wise men, medicine men that are so, just bathed in wisdom and that can, the mystic Indian, basically, right? And this is really, when you think about it, it's completely dehumanizing, right? You're not treating them as people. And this is something that really came into fashion with the hippie baby boomers, the New Age movement in the 1960s and in the 1970s, that was fundamentally anti-Western, as in anti-European civilization. They were anti-Christian. They were looking for other stuff, and there's nothing wrong with looking for other stuff. But they fetishized everything they went to look at. They did the same thing with like India, as in not Native American, as in like the Indian subcontinent. They did the same thing with every culture that they connected to, because baby boomers were fundamentally very shallow and narcissistic, right? So they just kind of assumed that they could just incorporate all of it, and they would also look at all of it as like so wonderful, right? And so much better, obviously, than what they'd grown up with, because they were forced to go to church or something like that, right? So you had this, from that period onwards, this fetishization of Native American spirituality that somebody like Nathan Phillips has been very easily able to take advantage of, right? He has all of this cultural power, right? He has this cultural power of that isn't really his. It's not legitimately his, but he's taken it on by taking on the trappings of an elder, by taking on the trappings of Native American spirituality, and of course by knowing he can play off of his victimhood, right? So that everybody in the establishment, in the media establishment at least, was going to listen to him right away when he said, that here he was, this elder, this pipe holder, a Native American, and he just added in Vietnam vet just because, and he was being attacked by these horrible white right-wing Trump voting Catholic youths, right? And so it was like the perfect story. It was just, how could they not have misreported it for days, right? Because it was obviously something that appealed to every element of that boomer paradigm that has come down to us. If you want to get mad at someone for why Nathan Phillips is believed, right, and for his bad behavior, I don't think any of it is on other Native American people, right? His bad behavior on it was facilitated by the white leftist cultural establishment. That's where you can put the blame. And that's everything I wanted to say today. So I don't usually do political subjects here. I've brought up stuff once or twice, but I talk about politics in gaming, but not without gaming. If you don't like this, let me know. If you do like it, let me know. If you want to hear more about it, if you want to hear more about weird religious stuff, let me know about that, right? If you thought this was insightful, tell me. And if you're watching this because you saw the link to this, most of the other videos in my channel are about tabletop role-playing, Dungeons & Dragons, and stuff like that. So unless that's your thing, you might not really get into this channel. But if it is your thing, or if you think it might be your thing, or if you just like listening to me talk, by all means, hit the subscribe button and that notification bell so you get updates to when I'm doing videos. Okay? And for everybody else, thank you so much for listening, as always. If you want to support me, I've still got a Patreon page until, Jordan Peterson gets his alternative out there. So you can get on Patreon and support me there. Or you can click on the link to my blog, and to the right-hand side of my blog, there's a PayPal button. You can support me on PayPal. If I get supported, I'll do more videos more often. And share this video wherever you think it'll be well received. Thank you very much. Currently smoking Lorenzetti Half Volcano plus Cornell and Deal's Morning Drive.